Good morning, everyone. This is Marcia, and we're just admitting everybody into the webinar. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. And we are recording. And it would be great as you are coming on if you would type into the chat where you're from. I see Dawn Stockmo. Hi, Dawn. Cleveland. I am in Tucson today. Indianapolis, okay, Baltimore. Broward County. Richmond, wow, everywhere. Chicago, Flint, Cape Cod. Oh, Tracy, you're in Cape Cod.
Not my house.
Oh, Lori, I'm so glad you're here. Lori, you are gonna love this. You're gonna love this webinar. Kansas City, Des Moines. Hi, Stephanie. Springfield, Illinois. Donna, that is where I was born. Oh, so long ago. Community Wealth Builders in Baltimore. Okay, that's not an organization I know, but I bet a lot of other people do. If you are just coming in, am I echoing? Is that me?
Little.
If you're just coming in, if you would, yes, I am. Okay. Oh, I think I stopped. Maybe Ann did something. Nope. Sign in. If you just type into the chat where you're from, that's useful to us to understand who all we're talking to. Okay. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. See if anybody else is joining us. So I am feeling kind of lonely out here, though. I don't think I saw anybody from west of the Mississippi. Ah, okay, Greta from Portland. Thanks. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started? We have just a dream team of panelists today. I'm really excited about it. So the title of this one is Leveraging the Power of Real Estate Professionals for Middle Neighborhood Success. I thought this morning I should have just called it Unleashing because there is a lot of power held by realtors. And I've always said that they are sort of natural. They are selling your neighborhood. The only question is whether they're doing it in the most informed way possible and with the most support possible. They can be great salespeople for the neighborhood. So let's just cover the basics of the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative. The national initiative is focused on mobilizing attention on middle neighborhoods, which may look like they're hanging in sort of okay if you're driving by at 30 miles an hour. But if you start to analyze the data historically on them, we're finding that many of them are on a slow decline. They're losing owner occupancy, they're losing value, all that kind of thing. And so we really are working to get people to look at their numbers and really intervene now before middle neighborhoods become the next set of distressed neighborhoods, or in hot markets that they become gentrified to the point where there are no affordable housing opportunities for first-time buyers. This initiative is coordinated by the National Community Stabilization Trust, and it's advised by a steering committee of a variety of those types of people. I think Ann's clicking me along, yeah. And so the other part of it, besides the steering committee, is the community practice. And that's what Ann and I work on coordinating and supporting. So it's an informal, lightly facilitated network. There's about 300 practitioners, researchers, and policymakers. Everyone is focused in one way or another on middle neighborhoods, at least for part of their work. We do a lot of webinars like this. We do referrals, one-on-one referrals, site visits, either real or virtual, organizing phone calls or Zoom meetings, and occasional larger group events. One of those large group events is happening at the end of this month, and we encourage you to join us. We'll talk more about it at the end of this call. It's the NeighborWorks Virtual Symposium. So just to remind you, if you don't already know, what we're talking about when we talk about middle neighborhoods. Most of them were built as single family housing for families with children, which is one of the reasons that they're having to reinvent themselves a bit, because that's a declining demographic overall in most of the country. They are still well more than 50% owner occupied, but you really have to pay attention to that and see what the long-term trend is. The housing stock is probably aging, but it's still in generally acceptable condition. The big problem we see is that it lacks the features and updates to compete well. For today's home buyers, we see a lot of one bathroom homes, which becomes, that's a really a tough thing to sell to a home buyer today. Property values may range from they're in slow decline, they may be flat, they may just be underperforming against the city or underperforming against inflation. Most of our members right now don't see hyperinflation of housing price as a risk in their middles, except for this last crazy year with the pandemic, which most economists see as temporary. However, if you look at all the census tracts that were middle income a few decades ago in your community, you may see that you've lost a lot of middles, and some of them have become high income neighborhoods, and more of them have become low income neighborhoods. There's a lot of, I guess the census tracts are mirroring the polarization of income in this country. And I just want to say, I think it's interesting that middle neighborhoods tend to be more racially and ethnically diverse than either their lower income or higher income counterparts. And the reason that we're concerned about them, one more slide, Anne, is that we've noticed that they're faltering in terms of being able to just be on autopilot. So by that we mean they're oftentimes having trouble reliably attracting replacement owner occupants. So you might see more and more that investors are starting to buy instead of owner occupants. They're having trouble generating home values that would actually support quality maintenance, repairs, and updates without having a big appraisal gap. And that limits, of course, the capital that's around for anyone to borrow or use in any other way to, make that housing stock relevant to today's home buyers. Irresponsible investors are like pests that, when the immune system of a neighborhood is weakened, they start moving in, and so they're losing their ability to repel them. Maintaining engaged residents that take stewardship of the neighborhood. Engaged residents are everything in a neighborhood. If they've started to move out, if you lost perhaps a generation of really engaged neighbors and you're getting more renters, anyone who's in the community building business knows that makes it harder. And finally, faltering in their ability to deliver home equity to owners and to deliver tax revenue to municipal government. And this has really troubling implications, if we're trying to close a wealth gap, and if we're trying to make cities continue to provide quality services throughout the city. All these things have to work. Want to draw your attention on our website, middleneighborhoods.org. You'll find a tab that says maps. And we have a mapping tool there where you can type in your MSA and choose from a number of different income tests on the left. And it'll pop up which census tracts meet those income guidelines. And you can start to play around and see, what the middle neighborhoods, or at least what neighborhoods by income strata are in your community. So sort of our topics that we're going through today are going to be the importance of real estate professionals in middle neighborhoods, how to engage them effectively. We have a panelist who's has more of a citywide perspective and perspective on promoting city living overall. Everyone will know the name of the organization when I say it. And then we'll wind up with some Q&A and discussion. So our panelists are Tracy Gasson. She's the president of Sigues, which is an outstanding marketing firm that does branding and really thoughtful ongoing campaigns to build a positive brand for a neighborhood and maintain that brand over the long haul. Jody Landers is a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services and PenFed Realty in particular. And he has been working in Baltimore as a partner with nonprofits and neighborhoods for a long time. And he's going to talk to us about, what it's like from the realtor side of things and how to engage them. And then Annie Milley is the executive director of Live Baltimore. I should say Tracy was the original director of Live Baltimore. So we have the beginning and the current here. And she's going to talk about, how Live Baltimore works with the local board of realtors and uses that relationship to disseminate useful information to all the neighborhoods. So let's get started with Tracy first. Again, she's the president of Sigues, and if you ever need a marketing plan for a neighborhood, I recommend her.
Well, thank you, Marcia. That was a very generous introduction. So before we jump in, I just want to expand a little bit what Marcia said. So you're going to get a very interesting timeline here. So I was the founding executive director of Live Baltimore in 1998. Jody Landers was on our board and board president at a very big transition point for us. I left in 2007 to start my own firm. And then you're going to transition into Annie and how they're progressing in today's market and today's technology, very different than when I started over 20 years ago. So my piece here, I'm going to try and give you some kind of background and understanding about how some of these programs came to be. And so I'm going to start in this base kind of platform. So if you brought us in to help develop a marketing plan for your neighborhood or community, it's kind of these 7 core steps that we take, right? So what is the brand of the organization, the brand pillars, and who are you? What do you care about? What's your value proposition? Then you have your brand identity, right? Which is your visual components, your logo and tagline and things like that. And then the outcome goals, right? So there is no marketing plan without a target. What are you trying to accomplish? And target audiences, right? So you might have internal and external. And then you get into the fun part, which is the strategies and the tactics. Notice here how much work has to be done until you get into the implementation side. And then you talk about priorities and budgets and, what are the KPIs to know if it's working. So what we're going to talk about here is external, specifically real estate professionals. And why? So when I first started the organization in 1998, we knew that we had a bit of a challenge on our hands. It was the early 90s. Baltimore City was losing 1,000 residents a month net. That means however many were coming in, that's what we were losing. We were hemorrhaging population. We went from a high of 950,000 to now it's under 600. And we knew that real estate professionals were gateway influencers, right? Someone could come to Baltimore or be relocated by their company, and that might be their first contact as a real estate agent. At the time, because the market was kind of so depressed and the city was in decline, we had a lot of real estate agents just wouldn't even show homes for sale in the city to buyers. And so I couldn't quite figure out how to, I don't want to say punish those, but kind of call them out. And so we shifted that and said, how do we find the agents that are positive and optimistic about the city and kind of turn up the volume on those agents? So this is a citywide approach. And then I'm going to tell you how we transition this into a neighborhood level approach when we've done it with neighborhood groups. So what we wanted to do was we felt that if real estate agents knew all the stuff that we knew about the city, how great the neighborhoods were, how all the homeownership incentives, they would be excited about it too. So talking with Jody and some other real estate professionals in the city, I tried to figure out how can we make this kind of a legitimate entryway to build these partnerships. And so we created an education program through the continuing education component for licensed real estate agents. I wrote a curriculum. I had no idea what I was doing. And let me say a sidebar here. All this work that was done, I had never done this before. I came from a marketing background, but never in this arena. And so I will tell you that anything that you want to do, surround yourself with really smart people and people that have expertise that maybe you don't, and you can accomplish any of this. So that's the key. I didn't know anything about real estate before I got into this pool. So we worked with the Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors, who Jody was the president, and through the state of Maryland, we got our curriculum approved, and it was they got a 3 credit hour in their continuing ed. And we focused on 3 things: the neighborhoods and their assets. Someone came from Baltimore City and talked specifically about the different homeownership incentive programs and how you could stack them. And then historic tax credits, which could be very complicated in the city, but could be a big financial boost for a buyer. The results, in the very first year we did this, I think we were doing it maybe every other month or every 3rd month or so. We had a lot of agents that took the class, and we said, hey, if you're interested in being one of our preferred real estate professionals, you can do it for free. You have to fill out this form. It was easy. Over that time, taking some class surveys, we knew we were onto something, because here we had 65% said that they felt differently about the city after leaving that class. 90% found the material extremely useful, right? So we're filling a void that they weren't getting it anywhere else. And you got to remember, this is kind of pre-internet too, so it wasn't as easy to get the information. And 90% felt it was a valuable accreditation. So over 7 years, we raised the fee. So maybe it started at 125, and as we built momentum, when I left in 2007, there were 125 paid agents that were paying $750 a year. So do the math on that as unrestricted funding. Now, mind you, there were a lot of components that went with this as far as their benefits. There's a give and take here, right? And so we spent a lot of money advertising and marketing in Baltimore and outside of Baltimore. So we spent some time building up the kind of value component of it. They were going to get exclusive access, right? Only these preferred agents could partner with us. They're going to get referrals from potential renters and buyers that come to us, because remember, we're out in the front. So we're trying to get customers to come to us first. Only preferred agents could be at our events, on the website, and publications. So no longer could you buy a table at an event. You basically were an annual investor, right? That's what your annual fee was. And they could leverage our big advertising budgets. At the time, we were doing a lot of advertising in Washington, D.C., which is very expensive, doing a lot of PR. And so that was a nice way for them to expand their exposure. And Baltimore City, because we were such a strong partner with the city and they were a funder of the organization, they constantly leaned on us and said, hey, who are the good agents? What are the great programs? And so again, this was a great benefit for them. Now, scaling this down to the neighborhood level, Bel Air Edison, which is also in Baltimore, we've done this with a couple communities, but this is a good example. So the same sort of thing, right? And Bel Air Edison is a bigger neighborhood. I know they're a member of the Middle Neighborhoods group. And this is kind of an overview, right? So now we're going to market specifically to real estate agents on a smaller scale. And what we did was we went into the MLS and we did research. We went back about 2 years, what agents were listing in the community and what agents were buyer's agents, right? So who was doing a lot of transactions? We specifically reached out to those agents only and invited them to be one of the premier real estate agents for Bel Air Edison. And one of the things here that's important is Bel Air Edison had a program before, but what we said is this is not just a money and partnership exchange. there's a give and take here. So in order, if you're going to say that this agent is kind of exclusive and better than anyone else, you have to arm them with some information. So we created a 2-hour training seminar. They did a narrated tour through the neighborhood, went into some houses so they could really walk away and talk intelligently about the community and what makes it great. And we also, limited the number of members to keep it exclusive and create value. So I think in Bel Air Edison, there's only 10 or 12 members. And so this is just some pictures, right? We've got Donette teaching the class, going through the tours. And you can see, I mean, they're really in a classroom setting. They're learning a lot and they really appreciated the information that they weren't getting anywhere else. When you're doing this kind of give and take partnership, you have to bring something to the table that they're going to want, right? So real estate agents, they want to get in front of potential customers. So letting them teach the home buying education seminars. We would feature any listings that they had in the neighborhood. We'd do it on social and e-newsletters and different ways we could promote it. Exhibitors at events that Bel Air Edison would have, and co-branding materials. And the key here is you want to keep them connected to the work of the organization and the success in the neighborhood, so they'll keep thinking about you, keep you top of mind, and be excited to do business there. So this was the brand that we developed for Bel Air Edison. And so then you can see how we take that brand and kind of tweak it for these different brand identities, right? So that's for the neighborhood, because one of the issues was you had Bel Air Edison Neighborhood Inc., right? That's the organization. And what we tried to instill was that's not a brand for the neighborhood. So we developed a brand for the neighborhood, and then out of that was this for the preferred agents. One of the things that we started to do was this original storytelling. So an e-newsletter that went out, we were doing original kind of photography and stories about businesses and residents moving there. And you'll see there's our property showcase, right? So this e-newsletter is going out to the general public. And here we're showcasing a new home renovation that one of our premier agents had listed. What we also did was we created a separate quarterly e-newsletter just for these real estate partners, where Jonette at the time was executive director, right? We're starting to build a relationship with her and these professionals. More kind of property showcase stuff, talking about trends in housing in both the city and the state and incentives. And so that was specifically just for that audience. So you see visually there's a lineage, but they're different. And really the net results here, right? We provide a needed and high quality service to your customers, right? That's your number one goal, both as an organization and likely is what your funders want to see, right? We want to attract new residents to the community that are more informed about incentives and opportunities. If there's money on the table, you want to be able to get that in front of all of them. Educate and influence an important target audience, right? So if there's another audience, let's say it's commercial real estate developers. Maybe you have a main street that really needs a little love. There's different ways that you can repackage this and kind of launch it. Also, what are you doing here? You're elevating your brand within the real estate community. You want to be seen as competitive, the next up and coming neighborhood, right? Isn't that what everybody's always asking about? Because these real estate agents, they talk amongst themselves back at the office, in their networking groups, and you want them to be saying, wow, you know, I hear a lot of great things going on in Bel Air Edison, right? Expanding your network of partners and supporters, and potentially you can generate some income, but it's might not really be a game changer depending at what scale you're talking about. So that's my presentation. And now I'm going to introduce Jody Landers, who Jody and I have known each other a very long time. And I really can't say enough about Jody and how thoughtful he is and giving of his time and expertise. I mean, I came to him on too many occasions of, I don't know what this is. Can you please help me out? So without further ado, city resident, real estate agent extraordinaire, and a wizard with data, I give you Jody Landers.
Thank you very much, Tracy. What a nice introduction. It's hard to say no to Tracy, I should tell you. She's very persuasive, and Annie also. I one of the things that one of the elements in this, it's kind of interesting how Baltimore is a little bit incestuous in a way. My background, I came out of community organizing and community development and ended up being the executive vice president of the Greater Baltimore Realtors for 15 years. So I was there at a very pivotal time when Live Baltimore was just forming and understood the value of these partnerships that need to happen because neighborhoods don't exist in a vacuum, and real estate agents, I understood, played a big role in how a neighborhood was going to be perceived in the larger community and in the market at large. So I'm going to pull up my, I think I can screen share. Let's see here. So one of the first things that you need to do is know what's going on in the housing market in your area. And whether you're talking citywide, or whether you're talking at the granular level, at a neighborhood or block level, know what's going on in the housing market in your area. And this is where you can really depend on the knowledge and expertise and resources of individual agents and realtor associations. I want to show you a sample of some data that these are data that I pull for. I'm going to scroll down to, this is my neighborhood. This is where I live. So what I do when I'm working with various neighborhoods is look at what are the trends. How are the sales volumes going? How are they changing over time? You can see the average home price. And I generally try to do it at least over a 5 to 6 year period of time. And if I can show 10 years, even better. So you can see in my neighborhood, we saw a big decline in volumes and then a slow increase in volumes matched with an increase in average home prices. Then I look at what's happening on a year-over-year basis in terms, are the values going up or down? Up here on this top right-hand corner, you want to look at what's happening in the market in terms of distressed sales. And you can see I track distressed sales and show how they've gone up and down over the years. And what you want to see there is a trend downward in the volume of distressed sales. But you're going to find it varies from neighborhood to neighborhood.
Jody, can you tell us what a distressed sale is?
A distressed sale would be a short sale or a foreclosure. So, and one of the things, short sales tend to sell for slightly more than foreclosures do. But what's really ironic is once a home reaches a foreclosure status, it generally sells for 50% below what the standard market is. And it just falling into the foreclosure category, it tends to reduce. So the extent to which you can try to intervene and prevent homes from going into foreclosure is going to benefit the whole market. But know what's happening in terms of foreclosures in your area. Know how the foreclosures are impacting on the average sale prices. And I don't know if you can see this on your screen. Mine blocks. Can you see the entire chart here? Let me see. I can close this out. Anyway, you can see how that I show standard sales in green, and then what the distressed sales are selling for. The foreclosures are red. So if you look at 2019, distressed foreclosures were selling for $100,000, and standard sales, meaning non-distressed, were selling for $200,000 in this neighborhood. And then I look at what types of financing are being used. I can tell you across the board in neighborhoods that are being impacted by distressed sales, the overwhelming majority, like 80 to 90% of the sales, are going to be cash sales. What you want to see is you want to see a healthy mix of cash, FHA, conventional financing. So I look at what's happening in the market in terms of the financing types. And then to give you some basis of comparison, go out beyond the individual neighborhood and say, okay, how does this neighborhood compare to the city as a whole? Or you could do a regional planning district as a whole. But just to be able to give you a basis for comparison of how your neighborhood or your target market is doing compared to the overall market. And again, you look at those same factors. And let me tell you, you can go to almost any agent and they could retrieve this data for you. It's at their fingertips. They may not even know that it's at their fingertips, but it is. And so that gets me to my second point in this presentation, and that is enter into partnerships, cooperative relationships with individual agents, and especially develop a cooperative relationship with a local or state realtor association, because they have tremendous resources that you can tap into, whether it's getting access to the multiple list or just getting access to agents. And Tracy mentioned that one of the things that we did early on is they came in and started teaching continuing ed classes. Well, that was a benefit to the association because our members needed the continuing ed and they needed the credits. And this was giving them information about how they could better market their listings in these target neighborhoods. Don't assume that real estate agents know what's going on in the individual neighborhood level, because 9 times out of 10, they don't unless they specialize in that neighborhood. I can tell you what happens. You know, Uncle John is ready to sell his property and he has a niece who's a real estate agent 2 counties away. And he puts the listing in the hands of the niece who has no clue what's happening in Bel Air Edison or my neighborhood, Lauraville. So you really want to develop these relationships so you can feed information to agents about the types of incentives that are available and the things that are going on in the market. And then my third point is to target to the agents and companies that are doing the largest share of business. This was a little analysis that I did for the Dundalk Renaissance Corporation. So we took a period of time and we said, okay, which companies are doing the lion's share of selling in this neighborhood? And then we looked at which companies are doing the lion's share of listings. And they don't always match up. In this case, they happen to. And I color coded them so you can see Long and Foster was both top listing and top selling in terms of volume of sales. Now, this gives you an idea of where you want to target your influence in particular, where you want to go to make sure that these companies are tied into the educational efforts you're trying to do. It also gives you an opportunity to market your services to them. And I can tell you, Dundalk Renaissance used this list when they were doing their convention or their neighborhood fair. And they went out to these companies and said, hey, we know that you're doing the lion's share of business. Would you be a sponsor for our event? And would you supply some agents, at a table to help market? So this helps you go to where the strength is. And by the way, in the Dundalk Renaissance area, if I would have run this list out, there were 120 companies or 150 companies doing business there, but they were one-offs. They were doing 1 or 2 sales. Here, when you add these up, you're talking in these 20 companies, they're doing 40 to 50% of the total business in this neighborhood. So again, it goes back to know your market, know who's doing it. And this is the kind of information that you can get when you have a partnership with agents and when you have a partnership with the association. Planning joint marketing activities and events like open house tours. believe it or not, this is not something that necessarily dawns on agents just intuitively. But if you go to them and say, hey, can we help set up one Saturday or a weekend where we're going to have all of the houses that are listed for sale open in our neighborhood? You'll get a lot of cooperation. People will say, yeah, that makes sense. They're used to sitting at open houses and maybe not getting a whole lot of people. But if you create a critical mass, you're going to get more people to come out. And even if you only list 2 or 3 agents in a given neighborhood to do this, it will catch on and more people will participate. And home buyer workshops. If you're going to do home buyer workshops, again, reach out to the companies that are doing and the agents that are doing the lion's share of business, and then invite them to come in and participate. Tracy's already mentioned this, exploring the possibility of conducting educational and professional development courses. This is going to have to be done at the association level, because in most cases, it's the realtor associations who are providing continuing ed classes to their members. This is an idea. This is something we've done in the Northeast area with the neighborhoods of Greater Lauraville. Develop a shared bank of marketing photos. So there are streets that have beautiful trees that are in bloom in the spring. There are certain businesses that have a really attractive storefront. There are landmarks in neighborhoods. Go out, take photographs of those, and post them up on your website for agents to download that they can include in their listings. They love it, because they can't always go out and take the perfect photograph of the garden spot in bloom in the spring. But if you have it available on your site, they can add this to their marketing data. Playgrounds, things that are going to be attractive as neighborhood amenities. Take those kinds of photographs and let the agents know, hey, we've got this photograph bank that's available for you to pull down photos to help market your listings. Number 7, this is where you're going to go to the agents and get their feedback. Who's buying in your neighborhood? The agents know, especially the selling agents. The listing agents may not have a clue, but the selling agents do. And they understand what the profile is of the buyers, who's looking in your neighborhood, who they've sold recent houses to. Develop a profile so you know what your target market is, and share that information with your realtor base. Aggregate the data and share that information so that they can better target the population that they're marketing to. And lastly, get regular reports on the new home buyers and put together some welcome packages that include information about the neighborhood, local businesses. Get some discount coupons from the local businesses, put them in the welcome packets. I can tell you in my own neighborhood, I have an auto search set up. So every single month, the officers in the neighborhood association get a report. Here are all of the homes that transferred, settled in the past month. So, we send out a group of volunteers, and my wife and I go out and deliver these packages, welcome packages. But these are really just a few very tangible, specific things that you can do to partner with agents that are going to benefit you as a neighborhood and benefit the agents. I mean, you don't have to be really bright to understand that you're going to get a tremendous amount of benefit out of this kind of marketing as an agent for your listings. And in particular, the agents who are kind of specializing in certain neighborhoods. And I see that more and more. There are more and more agents who identify themselves as the agent for Northeast Baltimore or the Greater Lauraville area or the Greater Hamilton area. anyway, that's my presentation. And, working with Annie's going to take you more into data. They've done an amazing job of aggregating data and sharing information about what's happening in the entire city of Baltimore. So take it away, Annie.
Well, thank you so much, Jody. Jody and Tracy have not only done an incredible job of setting me up for success in today's webinar, but they really built an incredible organization that I have the distinct privilege of stewarding as the fourth executive director of Live Baltimore. So thank you so much for doing that. And that's funny. Is everybody, I got a little bit of a strange message on my screen share and I can't see anyone all of a sudden.
We're seeing just the pictures of us.
And you, not your screen.
Well, my Zoom disappeared. So let me try that again.
There we go.
Much better.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, yes, as I was saying, have the privilege of being the fourth executive director of Live Baltimore. I've been with the organization for about a little over 8 years now, unbelievably. And just really happy to talk about this topic because truly real estate agents are some of the most important partners that we have at Live Baltimore. Many of you may be familiar with Live Baltimore, but I certainly don't assume that you all are. And so just a little bit of background, Live Baltimore is a citywide residential marketing organization. And so we are responsible for marketing all of the neighborhoods in the city of Baltimore, including the city's middle neighborhoods, which are really the bread and butter of what we do. And our name and our mission are synonymous. We want people to live in Baltimore City. We work with both renters and buyers, but we collect the most data about our home buyers. And so what we know from that data is that our organization annually works with at least 1 in 7 home buyers citywide, which is quite an impressive share of the market. And over the past 5 years, we've worked with an average of at least 1,100 home buyers in Baltimore City each and every year. And I do a lot of talks about Live Baltimore in our work, and I always emphasize these points, and especially the fact that this work really adds up. Over 5 years, we've impacted $1.2 billion in home sales in Baltimore City, and I would encourage you all to think about those numbers as you're talking about the importance of your work, because truly residents have an incredible impact on city economies. So a little bit of information about why real estate agents are so important and why we focus on them so much. In late 2020 and early 2021, Live Baltimore conducted what we believe to be the largest survey of recent home buyers in Baltimore City that was ever undertaken. We reached out to more than 16,000 individuals who we know through state records purchased a home in the most recent 3 years. And we got a lot of really interesting information from that survey. And I think, first, we all know this intuitively, but the survey really backed it up. Not only is our city competing against surrounding counties, 35% of those folks who ended up purchasing in the city, they were also looking at homes and considering homes in our surrounding counties. And then also within the cities, neighborhoods compete against one another. So why do we need to have these relationships with real estate agents, especially if you're focused in a particular neighborhood? Because you're competing with other surrounding neighborhoods. They're your partners and your collaborators, but they're also your competition. And so we found that among city home buyers, 48% were considering more than 3 city neighborhoods when they were shopping. But I think the most important thing that we found out here related to real estate agents is, we know that agents are really the gatekeepers to our neighborhoods. And I would say in Baltimore especially, the unfamiliar can be met with some distrust. So you really need to have agents who have heard of your neighborhood in order for them to be doing showings there. But what we learned from our survey is that people who successfully purchase in Baltimore City have supportive real estate agents. 70% of the home buyers that purchased in the city said that their real estate agent was the most supportive person in their buying process, more supportive than their spouse and partner, more supportive than their friends and family of their decision to purchase. And so that's just really important. Sometimes it's just about validation. When a buyer is shopping by themselves on Redfin or on Zillow online, they're finding homes on their own. If they call their agent and they say, have you ever heard of this neighborhood? And their agent says no, that alone could be enough to lose a sale. So agents are just really, really important. Tracy and Jody both talked about this, but again, just to reinforce it, because agents are so important, Live Baltimore has always prioritized relationships with agents, and especially our relationship with our local Board of Realtors. Tracy and Jody both set us up for this relationship very, very well many years ago, but it's been the job of everyone who has come after them at Live Baltimore to really steward this relationship. And we really prioritize this. I actually spoke to Al Ingram, the head of the Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors, this morning, and we speak very regularly, and we're truly authentic partners. So I would just encourage you, the leadership of your organization should really take responsibility for building a relationship with the leader of your regional Board of Realtors. Tracy talked about this, and Jody did as well. And believe it or not, there were some really great strategies put in place decades ago now that we continue. We are still at Live Baltimore teaching this 3 credit hour continuing education course through our Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors. And this is just such an important part of what we do because it allows us to maximize our reach to agents. You may not know this, but the National Association of Realtors is actually the largest professional association in the United States. Our own local Board of Realtors has over 5,000 member agents at this point in time, and that's growing all the time. And so, it's really difficult to reach all of those agents, but teaching a class is a great way to maximize your reach to that group. And at Live Baltimore, we still educate between 200 and 300 real estate agents with this class every single year. And that really adds up over time. Tracy talked about some of the curriculum that was in the original class, and we're still talking about down payment and closing cost assistance and tax credit programs. We're talking about renovation programs like Healthy Neighborhoods loans and others that are available. We're also talking about how to answer tough questions. If your neighborhood deals with perception issues, or if your city deals with perception issues, agents may not know how to answer those questions. And I would really encourage you just to confront the elephant in the room, put the elephant at the front of the classroom and have those conversations and talk about how you would answer a question so that agents can use your words the next time they get one of those questions. And then now a big part of our class is sharing Baltimore City neighborhood real estate market data, which I'm going to talk about more. As Tracy shared, there is a benefit to taking part in our continuing education class because our website reaches so many prospective buyers and renters in Baltimore. Many agents would like to appear on our website, and it's a requirement that they take part in our class in order to do so. We now use what we call our City Living Certified mark. So once you become a supporter of ours, a partner of ours after completing continuing education, you're able to use this City Living Certified mark in your email signature and on any marketing materials that you would like to use. And we have now a very robust tool for agents who are partners of ours. And you can go onto our website, you can search through those agents based on the neighborhood that they specialize on. Our agents now can tell us which neighborhoods they do the most business in, and we actually list those agents on the neighborhood profile pages on our website, which is probably the most important part of Live Baltimore's website. And that really gives people who are looking for neighborhood information that quick connection to agents who are really the most knowledgeable in those communities. And we think that's really very valuable. But I think what I want to talk about the most is what we do with some of the real estate data that Jody was sharing. And Jody's correct, certainly partnering with individual real estate agents is a great way to get access to real estate data. Any agent who has access to the multiple list service, they should be able to pull this data, but many don't spend the time doing so, or they might not quite understand how to do so. And so at Live Baltimore, understanding data ourselves and doing housing market data analysis in-house has really become a very important part of what we do. Once agents become our partners, they also have access to our data and our data analysis. And we're pushing out proactively information on the city's market every single month. So what we do, just a little bit about our data analysis at Live Baltimore. Every single month, we're going into the multiple list service. We're pulling down information about every single sale transaction that happened in Baltimore City. We're using GIS software to code all of those sales to what we call in Baltimore City, the city's neighborhood statistical areas, of which there are 278. So we're coding every sale against the neighborhood statistical area. And then we're creating a series of reports. And what you see on your screen is what a monthly report looks like from Live Baltimore. And you'll notice that it's pretty user-friendly. These reports are put together by our graphic designer because these reports have become a very significant marketing tool for us. We believe that building confidence in the market is one of the most important things that we do at Live Baltimore. Often there's a perception that there's only this part of the market or that part of the market that's performing well. And so what we want to do is really arm agents and arm the public, residents of neighborhoods, and especially the media with accurate information about what's going on in the housing market. So we put together these very robust monthly reports. We distribute those to our partner agents, to CDCs and other nonprofits. We share them with government. And most importantly, we share them with our local media. And I can't tell you, just by having this information, how often we get called for comment to be included in monthly articles about the housing market in Baltimore City. And then how often we're able to actually pitch stories about particular neighborhoods where there's something significant happening in the housing market and successfully get stories written about those neighborhoods. And when we do, we have the opportunity to turn to our partner agents and to have them give quotes, to get featured also in the media, and to serve as third-party validators. So really, data is a significant marketing tool if you can get access to it and if you can take an interest in it. Just to go even further, in addition to our general analysis, we do work at Live Baltimore where we're grouping neighborhoods into what we call submarkets. In Baltimore City, we have something called the housing market topology, and this is how we identify what our middle market neighborhoods are. And just for your information, what you see on your screen, green are our upper, the sort of teal green, that's our upper middle neighborhoods, and yellow are our lower middle neighborhoods. And you can see that they're scattered across different geographies of the city. So by clustering them, we're able to compare like neighborhoods, and we're also able to talk about what's happening in particular areas of the market. So we're able to say, the upper middle market is outperforming the city as a whole. And again, that's a way to market your community by really just showing people how strong the market is and boosting that consumer confidence. The other thing that we're able to do with that data, once we have those submarket cluster analysis done, and we also have the citywide done, we can pull that information like Jody was sharing about individual neighborhoods. And we can do things like say, the neighborhood is outperforming other neighborhoods in its submarket. We can say a neighborhood is outperforming the city as a whole, or it's underperforming the city as a whole. And again, these are talking points that you can use to promote your neighborhood to agents that you would like to be doing more business there, and to consumers who want to know that your neighborhood is a good investment. And again, I'll just sort of say that this data is so powerful, and I'll share a story. When the pandemic first set in, we started putting together not just monthly reports, but weekly reports. We were looking at what was happening in the market on a weekly basis because we were all uncertain about what was going to happen with the market. We started putting those together again in very professionally designed reports. We started pushing those out very, very broadly to folks in the industry, to our partner organizations, and to our city's government, and sharing what was happening every single week and having discussions about that. And this data was so valuable that, in fact, when Baltimore City had to rewrite its entire budget in about 2 weeks, when the pandemic set in, they actually used our housing market data to help project what the revenue for the city was going to be. And that helped them to rewrite the city's entire budget. So I'll just, sort of end with that to say that the data that agents have is so powerful. And by leveraging it, you can really build relationships with people that you want to have relationships with. You can generate interest in your organization, and you can really improve the confidence in your market, which is such a critical piece of marketing a neighborhood or city. And
Thank you, Annie. That last comment you made about confidence, it's just so true. I'm a disciple of David Belke, who is an original Baltimore person, for those of you who know him or have heard of him. And I learned at his feet the importance of building confidence in communities. But speaking of confidence, I want to toss out the first question to the panelists. And by the way, everybody else, please type questions into the Q&A or into the chat, and we'll make sure they get answered. But it's the big question about COVID and the way markets are behaving in the last year. So could you give all of us, you're all from working in the Baltimore market. In every market I've been talking to people in, they've seen this shortage of supply and competitive bidding and being outbid by cash investors and stuff like that. What's the market been like there in the last year? And does that make your work less important right now because you don't have to promote anything, everything's selling? Go ahead, however you want to answer that. To any of you or all of you.
Well, I can tell you, being on the street and actually listing and selling, that it's a little crazy in the market. The houses are not staying on very long. It's created a set of expectations among sellers that are probably a little unrealistic, but I would hate to be a buyer in this market because there's a lot of competition for the most desirable properties out there. People are putting in, escalation clauses in contracts, and so it's a really interesting market. One of the positive aspects of it is, I know I've seen in some areas and in my own neighborhood where there were some properties that were sitting vacant for a long time, and they're now being absorbed in the market, and people are coming in and actually doing good work, good renovation, and trying to improve properties up to the top end of the market. So we really don't have the bottom feeders out there. We have people who are doing good work, creating value, and then marketing to try to reach to the top end of the market, which is very, very positive.
Yeah, that's a real win for Baltimore.
Yeah, I just was pulling up our first and second quarter of 2021 data. And so, we've seen over the past 3-year average this year, in the first 2 quarters, a 37% increase in the number of sales, a 31% increase in the average price, and a 43% decrease in the days on market. So, the market is doing really, really well. But again, I think what I want to emphasize is that so often there's a perception that only those, the most competitive communities, where here that would be in North Baltimore and along our waterfront, there's a perception that those are the only markets that are doing well. And I think with an eye on middle neighborhoods, it's really important to us. We're always trying to point out, no, actually more than 50% of the sales, which I always remind people also, every sale is a purchase. So more than 50% of the purchased homes in Baltimore City are in middle market communities. And our upper middle markets are trending right along with the city overall. Our lower middle markets, we're seeing even more increase in sales price and even more increase in volume. And, those are neighborhoods where they were really, bordering on failed markets where we couldn't have renovation happen, right? Because the values were too low. And so I think it's really important for us to be honest in our conversation about the markets. There are some neighborhoods where the values have been too low, and where if we want healthy, functioning neighborhoods, we needed to see those values come up. And that's actually where they're coming up more. And I think that balancing the conversation about affordability with the conversation about market health, especially in middle neighborhoods, is really important. And something that we should be focused on and not just panicked about affordability issues.
Agreed. Tracy?
I just want to add one thing that's kind of a tangent here, and Jody mentioned it around the renovation piece. In both Bel Air Edison and in Dundalk, when we work on those projects, not necessarily in this market because it's so crazy, but you can do the same thing with the kind of targeting real estate agents at the neighborhood level with people that buy and renovate homes that do quality work and are looking to bring in homeowners, not to kind of flip and rent. And so that's another thing, like even in Dundalk, they did a program where they had identified one or maybe two renovators that were really reputable, and that they were able to get some homeownership incentive purchase programs that were able to be used just on those homes. And so you're bringing a partnership in value, because at the end of the day, you're a small organization, you're probably not renovating the homes in the neighborhood. And so you need to build those alliances. And so, think of different ways that you can kind of expand upon this concept.
Very, very good point. I love that idea. I just was talking to a big CDFI nonprofit in New Mexico, and they have started, in cases where it makes sense, they will put in a cash offer on a property that they know one of their home buyers will snap up in a minute, so that they're out there competing against the cash investors, because they have the cash and the flexibility to do that. And then they do an immediate closing in the same month, hopefully, to reduce the second set of closing costs. But I could see how they could do the same thing, but do it with a preferred list of developers who they knew were going to flip, do quality rehab and flip. We have a number of questions here. So Tiffany asked a couple of questions. Has the need to address deferred maintenance significantly impacted selling price? And if so, to what extent? Like, are people buying houses whether they're the deferred maintenance, whether there is or is not deferred maintenance?
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, because of the pressure on the buyers now, people are overlooking things that they wouldn't have overlooked in the past, on the assumption that they're going to have to go in and do some work, understanding it, to get the house, they're going to have to go in and do some work to bring it up to their standard or their taste.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I know this has all happened so fast, but it makes me wonder if there might be some new appetite in the larger Baltimore market, Annie, for, like, I don't know, some kind of rehab classes or affinity groups of people who bought properties but want to rehab them or something. It may be too soon to tell, but I'd be interested to know how many people out there have got fixer-uppers, and if it's significantly more than it used to be.
Mhm. Well, we know that those rehabbers that work in our city are just desperate for properties. They just, we have an organization called the Small Developers Collective, and every time I talk to them, they're just saying how difficult it has been to get their hands on properties. Rehabbers want to be doing work, and so as Jody said, there are a number of properties that had not been necessarily officially vacant, but sitting unoccupied. And I think that this market has caused some folks to sort of get off the fence and maybe sell that home that they inherited years ago and have just sort of let sit. And I think that'll be a benefit to our communities overall.
Yeah, I think so. So tell me about the Small Developers Collective. That sounds really interesting.
The Small Developers Collective is a group of small rehabbers and developers that have, they're doing row home rehab primarily, or sometimes detached rehab. And they organized themselves over the past few years, and they now have an association and leadership. And they've been a great partner. It's a good way to connect with small developers and people who are often landlords. And we've just have great relationships there now. And it's great to have a window and a connection into that community.
I've always been intrigued by that sector, just because I've seen some in certain neighborhoods and nonprofits from time to time, really interesting partnerships where the nonprofits are actually giving some kind of incentives or, low interest financing or something to get more of those quality small developers in their neighborhood, because, it leverages their ability. Even if they're doing purchase, rehab, and sale, they can only do so much of it a year. But Tracy's nodding her head. I guess she's seen that or actually recruited those people. Tiffany also asked whether the increased purchases right now are happening from existing residents or transplants. Is there any particular pattern, any difference than there usually would be about who's buying?
I don't think so. It's hard to have that information in real time. You can get more information about that once things are recorded with the state, not so much from the MLS data, but what we do know is that the majority of people who purchase homes in Baltimore City, they rented here first. So, I really talk a lot lately about the value of renters. Renters are your pipeline to home ownership. So, renters are not necessarily a negative for a community because renters become buyers. And in Baltimore, more than 60% of the people who purchase homes, they rented first. So that's still what we believe the trend is here.
And by the way, several years, about 4 or 5 years ago, I did this analysis of some of the city incentive programs. And one of the things I found is people who took advantage of the incentives that were being offered very often already lived in the neighborhood or in the vicinity. And as Annie said, they were renters. They're renters, and they decided to move, live there and purchase a home and take advantage of the incentives that were there.
I'll throw in too on the importance of the renter side. It's much easier to turn a renter that lives in your neighborhood or your city into a home buyer than it's going to be to pull somebody in from the outside, right? They're already attached to things there. One of the things that we did way early on, this was long time ago, but Downtown Partnership in Baltimore City, which focuses just on downtown. And we were having a fairly high vacancy rate in the larger managed rentals, right? The big towers. And so we came to Downtown Partnership and said, hey, we're doing these housing tours for home buyers throughout the neighborhoods. We want to do something that's just for renters in Baltimore City, downtown, because we know that they're potential prospective buyers. And so we created a rental tour, that same sort of thing. You get on the bus, you go around to different properties and see different units. We did it for a couple of years, and the apartment communities paid for it, right? So all the advertising and what it costs to rent the bus. And so, don't kind of narrow your lens so far that it's just homeownership. Yes, that's probably where all the incentives are and kind of where all the conversation is. But there's a lot of value in just residents, period.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, from David Sanchez, who is the person who staffs the National Middle Neighborhoods Initiative from NCST, asks, as we emerge from this, I assume he means the COVID crisis, do you expect an uptick in the number of distressed properties in Baltimore? And are there good strategies for selling distressed properties to owner occupants. I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe one of our panelists knows what you mean, but why would you expect an uptick in distressed properties, David?
Well, I think there's been concern about a foreclosure, sort of a looming foreclosure crisis post-pandemic. So the eviction moratorium and the foreclosure moratoriums that are expiring are causing some concern. And I think to be determined what we're going to see here in Baltimore. I think we're cautiously optimistic that we've received a lot of federal assistance and we have a lot of programs that are being put in place to hopefully avoid that. And then in terms of strategies, I think Tracy really was alluding to this. You can build relationships with small developers that are more interested in turning properties over to homeowners as opposed to putting those properties up as rentals. And so if homeownership is your goal, it's really about knowing the small developer community and then trying to strategize with those developers to ensure that the properties get into their hands. We have good organizations in the city that have intervention buying programs. So I'm thinking about St. Ambrose here in Baltimore. They have an agreement with HUD where they are getting access to foreclosures before others. So they can do intervention buys and then they turn those over to homeowners. So that's a strategy that I think is good for those CDCs and organizations that are able to engage in it.
Yeah, and I guess I just would add this about the whether we'd see an uptick in distressed properties. I think the last time we saw this issue, it was in a declining market, where there were a lot of people in forbearance. And when they were in forbearance and the market's declining, they have no incentive to stay in the property because they saw their value eroding. My hope is that because of the market dynamics, that people will be less likely to just walk away from a mortgage, even though they're in forbearance, because the market values have appreciated so much, which is a big difference from what we saw the last time. In a lot of neighborhoods, people were seriously underwater and they owed more than the home was worth, and they didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's a little different now, but it certainly, I'm really concerned about the rental market because there are a lot of tenants who have not paid rent for a long time, and the landlords many are not in a position to keep carrying tenants who haven't paid rent because they're paying their own mortgage. So hopefully some of this relief money will start to get out. I think they've been slow to make that kind of assistance available to the landlords and the tenants, but hopefully that will help mitigate it. But I don't expect to see the same impact on the ownership market.
That's a great distinction, Jody. Thanks for that. And by the way, David, if you want to type into the chat, I actually am not familiar with any of the strategies that NCST, for those of you who don't know that organization, it was created during the foreclosure crisis. And if you have heard of it, it may be because they really created the First Look program where they were in kind of an intermediary between the secondary markets and HUD on, foreclosed properties, and making sure that those foreclosed properties, at least that benevolent purchasers like nonprofits, had a first look and an option to buy before they went out to any developer on the open market. And it made a big difference in, the disposition of those properties and their impact on neighborhoods. So NCST is a real expert on this issue, but type anything you want in the chat, David. So Seth asks, this should be an easy one. If you guys can say a little bit more about the formation of Live Baltimore. Is it a freestanding CDC or quasi-government, or where the initial funding come from, et cetera, et cetera? I think you'll be surprised. Go ahead.
So I'll jump in here. So this goes back to that conversation about the 90s, right, and hemorrhaging population. So Live Baltimore actually was a component of a series of things. It was like Learn Baltimore, how to improve the education system, the Live, and there was one other piece. And the Live Baltimore piece kind of was the one that got picked up. And there was a nonprofit called CPHA, Citizens Planning and Housing Association. They took it on and said, we're going to try and do something with this. I know there was a question about funders. The initial funders of this were the city of Baltimore, who put in, I think it was $50,000 a year for 3 years. Mind you, in the 90s, that was a lot of money for an unknown, unproven idea. Fannie Mae at the time, when they were doing kind of their housing fairs and all that, they put in some money. We also had a big advantage because someone that worked in Fannie Mae that was based in Baltimore was very influential with the larger organization. And so CPHA took this on. They did a series of kind of neighborhood conversations, and they did this component called the Neighborhood Marketing Institute, which was the idea of let's help neighborhoods start to market themselves. I attended it as the marketing person in my neighborhood of Butchers Hill. At the time, I worked in television, I produced commercials, etc. And we gave a presentation about what we were doing in Butchers Hill. And then they said, hey, you should apply for this job. I knew nothing about nonprofits. This goes back to my earlier conversation. I didn't know anything that I was doing. I just asked everybody that did know. And so out of that, we incubated within CPHA, and it was kind of like, here, do whatever you want, but oh, by the way, you better find money to do it. And I'm like, what? Didn't understand this concept at all. And so we had the luxury of being kind of, nurtured within this larger nonprofit. And CPHA was doing all sorts of work on regionalism and really community organizing in these really distressed communities. So we were there for, I think, about 5 years, and then we spun off into our own separate 501c3. And I will add, as a side note, when we did that and applied for the IRS 501c3, the IRS had a lot of questions about the preferred real estate agent program, because they wanted to know, were these agents financially benefiting from your partnership, which they don't like. So we walked a very fine line about saying it wasn't a financial component, because early on when we created it, there really wasn't a money component there. So we spun off and then created our own separate entity. At the time, really pre-internet, was really important to have a storefront where people could come in, like a real estate office. We had a mortgage lender on site. Any one of our preferred real estate agents was there. And then there was a staff person who knew everything about the city that could talk to you about all the options from schools and neighborhoods and, what are the best assets to match. And so from there, different foundations within Baltimore supported it. But the game changer was going to the city and saying, hey, look, we are doing amazing work on your behalf that you are not doing, and we can't sustain on $150,000 a year. At one point I got that bumped up to about 275 a year, which was a lot. And then it was the game changer of, okay, we can't rely on foundation money. How can we kind of social enterprise monetize some of these programs that we're doing? And that was when you have the unrestricted funding that you can really do kind of these creative things with. And Jody was there for the separation from the original parent nonprofit, which was challenging, but I don't know how we could have successfully done it otherwise, because you're really out on a limb. I mean, when you're trying to get money from foundations for poverty and, childhood issues, and you're saying, hey, we're going to market the city, it's not going to be at the top of everybody's list.
So I'll just add, we're an independent 501c3 nonprofit, and today about 50% of our funding does come from the city. But especially when I'm speaking to folks from other cities, I like to mention almost every city in the United States has what's called a destination marketing organization. That is an organization that's responsible to promoting a city to tourists. And typically, those organizations are funded through some sort of legislation, and they're very well funded, millions of dollars per year. And they're typically receiving the majority of their funding, if not 100% of their funding, through public funds. Residential marketing is critically important. It's critically important to cities, especially cities like Baltimore that have been losing population. Residents generate the majority of our city's tax revenue. They're responsible for jobs in every single sector. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable ask for governments to be investing in the marketing of residential neighborhoods that don't have attractions for tourists. So it continues to be a conversation about how much public funding we receive and how much of it we raise on our own. And Jody was with us on Friday. We do a lot of private fundraising, don't we, Jody?
Yes, you do. Do it well.
What about,
Fun part.
are you like hotel tax? Is that what funds your tourism
That's
agency?
what funds most tourism
Yeah.
organizations. Yeah.
I've worked with one of them, and it is very interesting what a delightful big pot of money that is that comes in every year. Lucas, by the way, I just wanted to mention, I think there are a couple of people here from Cleveland, and I know that Cleveland has created a Live Cleveland that's been around for a while. So if anybody wants to
Time out. Let's
Oh.
just time out on that. Okay. Let's give props to Cleveland,
Oh,
because when the Living Cleveland Center, actually Living Cleveland Center started before Live Baltimore.
oh,
When I started there, there was nowhere to go. Like, where do you get this information? And there were two organizations. There was Pittsburgh in Cleveland, right? Pittsburgh under Paul Brophy, who had been doing some of this neighborhood level marketing. And the Living Cleveland Center was almost defunct. And I had gotten some information from them. And the whole idea for the preferred program from mortgage lenders to real estate agents, I stole it from Cleveland. All
yeah.
that we did was we kind of really blew it up and we fortified it. But props to Cleveland for coming up with it to begin with.
Yes, we always credit Cleveland. And sadly, my understanding is that Live Cleveland is no longer an independent organization and not really working as actively as they once were. But yes, they were first. We just happen to, I believe, be the largest residential marketing organization in the United States, if not one of the only at this point.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I know that, well, I won't go into details about Live Cleveland, so everybody in Cleveland can figure that out. But I think it's both interesting to consider how you could grow yourself, your own Live Wherever organization, but also interested to consider how you could start and replicate some of their best strategies just at the neighborhood level or a cluster of neighborhoods or something like that, so that you don't have to go from 0 to 60, but you could go, you know, from 0 to 30 maybe, and plan that out. Because I think many of these strategies are, you know, implementable at the neighborhood level. And I think Tracy does a lot of that kind of work with neighborhoods to help them implement that stuff. I actually wanted to skip over, Jody, could you put up again your page where you have the charts and graphs for Lauraville?
Sure. Let's see.
That whole business, I think for many of us, about tracking distressed sales versus regular sales was really interesting. And I'm a little bit curious about, yeah, right there.
Okay.
So average sale price by transaction type. First of
Right.
all, do most MLS, I mean, is that a field in MLS data? Okay.
Yeah, so in most MLSs, they're going to say, is it a foreclosure? Is it a short sale? Is it a standard sale? There may be some other categories,
Okay.
but when you boil them all down, those are the basic three categories. Either
Okay.
it's
Very interesting.
standard, which would be a non-distressed, or a short sale, or a foreclosure or pre-foreclosure. You know, there are a whole range of those kind of categorizations. But yes, you can segment it out.
Do you know what kind of financing was used, whether it was cash or conventional or?
Well, that's where if you look at Lauraville, so I didn't do it for the
Yes,
whole city market, but yes. Now, the data is only good as the information being entered. Not all agents, when agents put in a sale, they don't always include the type of financing, but you get enough of a sample that you can make some pretty good deductions about what's happening in the market with respect to the type of financing.
sure. That little chart on the bottom right
Bottom,
corner,
yes.
fascinating. And I wonder, Jody, if I don't know if you're still producing this kind of charts lately, or maybe Annie, from some other processing of data, but is that cash portion of the sales going up the way it sounds like in the media dramatically right now, or is it too soon to tell?
It's down in our lower value markets. It's up in our higher value markets.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I find that true also. It's down in the lower markets because people are able to get financing and values are going up. I've had recent cash sales in the $400,000 to $500,000 range because people have the cash and they want to buy into certain neighborhoods and they're willing to put the cash into it. So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah, we
very
typically
unusual.
we typically will say that cash sales are indicative of investor buyers, and we treat them as a negative indicator in lower middle markets. So I've been having to give a lot of explanation about the increase in cash sales in upper markets. It's just about the competitive nature
I
of
bet
the
you are.
market.
I
Yeah.
bet, yeah, the interpretation of the data could be different now. Okay, so there's somebody else here, anonymous, has just pointed out something that I think is really important to point out, that you can't fix every structural problem in a city with having partnerships with real estate agents. So they sort of ask, what does I mean, I'm curious, I'll extrapolate on this question. It must be really obvious to all three of you in your different roles what the structural issues are that are the biggest obstacles or stumbling blocks, I guess, for buyers to get over buying in the city. Do you ever get involved in policy issues around taxes, schools, et cetera?
Yes. That's the answer. All of those things are critical. And Baltimore City, Annie mentioned this, we're competing with the surrounding counties. The property tax rate in Baltimore City is twice what it is in Baltimore County, which completely surrounds the city. So a $200,000 house in Baltimore City will pay $4,000 a year in property taxes, and a $200,000 house in Baltimore County will pay $2,000 a year in property taxes. It's a big difference. So
Yeah.
I'll just add that the only way for that to change is for us to be more successful and to have more people move in and to have our values in our undervalued communities increase. So, we do a lot to assist folks with schools. There's many more high performing schools now than there were in the past. And we certainly hope that our property taxes will reduce as we see more residents move in and more neighborhoods stabilize. We draw a line where our role is in creating a stronger, more equitable economy in the city, and where other folks' roles are. And we partner with many people who are working directly on those issues, and we tend to stay in our lane.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the schools, you can see a direct correlation in the neighborhoods that have access to schools that are perceived to be better, or they have access to some charter school possibilities. It definitely helps the housing market and attracts families with children, for example. But in Baltimore City, more than a third of the buyers are single buyers. They don't have children, and actually single female buyers have tended to make up the largest percentage of buyers Any category.
That is a really, really important thing to think about. What is the makeup of those people who are choosing to buy in your community? And you can think about who isn't, but you can compare that to just demographic data generally. I think there are neighborhoods that I work with that are really stuck on this idea that, you know, the gold standard is to get the 2-parent household with 2.5 kids. And that is a declining demographic in most places. So we need to really be organizing our promotion of our places around the people who are the growing demographic. So I need to pull us together. Annie had to take off, and I really appreciate your help, Annie. We always like to promote our partner, Center for Community Progress, who has the Cornerstone webinar series. So take a look at their webinars too. They do great ones. And this is really important. We're having this event, this symposium on August 25th that has a whole lot of really interesting sessions about middle neighborhoods. It's a symposium that's in the middle of the NeighborWorks America's Virtual Training Institute. And if you want to attend the symposium only with there's a few short lead up sessions to it that you have the option of joining. You can use this promo code VTI SYMP as in symposium, SIMP 21, and that will waive all the fees associated with the event. So you and any of your colleagues can attend it for free. And I wonder if we can put into the chat before we close what the link is to registration, which means she's probably going to interrupt the flow of this if she touches her mouse, but that's okay, Anne, go for it. So please email us if you have ideas for webinars, case studies, anything, and join the community of practice. All you have to do is go to middleneighborhoods.org. At the bottom of any web page is a little registration form where you can sign up either to get our newsletter or to also be a member of the community of practice. And we would really love to have you. So thank you so much to Tracy and to Jody and to Annie. I always learn things from listening to what's going on in Baltimore. I always think of it as the cradle of civilization for neighborhood strategy. And so I really appreciate their assistance. I hope everyone will follow up on their ideas and try implementing them at both small and large scale. You know, there's all of our information. And before I absolutely disconnect us, I wanted to point out that David San, who works with St. Ambrose, which is a small nonprofit housing developer. I mean, it's big by nonprofit standards in Baltimore. It says that over the past year or two, 75% of home buyers have been single buyers with no kids. Yeah. Very different from past experience. And what's important to that buyer pool may be different than a buyer with kids. Yeah. Okay. Let's see, is there anything else besides thank yous here? No, thank yous. Yeah, great panel, you guys. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email with both a recorded webinar link, and if we can talk the slides out of our panelists, we'll also have those. It sounds like a lot of people would like those as well. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.